The shovel bit into frozen earth with a sound like breaking bones, and Isaac Winters paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, despite the bitter cold that made his breath fog in the pre-dawn darkness. He had been digging graves for the dead of Thornmark for 3 years now, ever since the fever had taken his wife and left him with nothing but calloused hands and a job no one else wanted. The latest war with the orc clans had filled the cemetery faster than he could dig, and today he faced the grim task of preparing a mass grave for the soldiers who had fallen defending the eastern pass. The wagon arrived as the sun broke over the horizon, its wheels creaking under the weight of bodies wrapped in stained canvas. Isaac counted 12 as the driver helped him unload them into the pit he had spent the last 2 days excavating. The driver spat into the dirt, muttered something about savage monsters, and left Isaac alone with the dead as he always was. Isaac did not share the hatred that burned so bright in most of Thornmark. The dead were simply dead. Whether they had been killed by orc blades or human arrows made no difference to the earth that received them. He was preparing to say the traditional words over the grave when he heard a sound so faint he almost convinced himself he had imagined it. A rasping breath, weak and irregular, coming from somewhere in the pit below. Isaac's heart lurched. He had heard stories of soldiers buried alive after battles, mistaken for dead in the chaos. He grabbed his lantern and lowered himself carefully into the grave, moving between the shrouded forms with the lantern held high. There. Movement beneath one of the canvas wrappings at the far end. Isaac hurried forward and pulled back the cloth, expecting to find a young soldier clinging to life. Instead, he found himself staring into a pair of amber eyes set in a face of pale green skin. An orc. A girl, he realized, no more than 18 or 19 by human reckoning, her dark hair matted with blood and dirt. She wore the leather armor of an orc scout, torn and soaked through with blood from a wound in her side. She should have been dead. By all rights, she should have been dead. But her eyes were open and aware, fixed on his face with an intensity that made his breath catch. Her hand shot out with surprising speed and clamped around his wrist with desperate strength. Her tusks were small, barely visible past her lips, but her grip was iron despite her obvious weakness. "Please," she whispered in heavily accented common, the word breaking on a sob. "Please do not bury me." Isaac's mind raced. If anyone in Thornmark discovered he had found a living orc among the dead, they would kill her immediately. The war had made people cruel, made them see monsters where they might once have seen only strangers. But he could not simply cover her back up and pretend he had heard nothing. He could not shovel dirt onto a living girl, no matter what her blood might be. "I will not bury you," he said quietly. Her grip on his wrist tightened even more, as if she did not quite believe him. "But I need to get you out of here before anyone sees. Can you climb?" She tried to sit up and immediately went pale, her breathing turning shallow and rapid. The wound in her side was still bleeding sluggishly, and Isaac realized she had likely been lying among the dead for hours, slowly dying while no one noticed she still lived. He made a decision that might well cost him everything. "Hold on to me," he said, and carefully lifted her from the pit. She weighed less than he expected, her body lean and wiry beneath the armor. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out, and Isaac saw blood well around one of her small tusks. He laid her on the cold ground beside the grave and quickly pulled his coat off to wrap around her. "My house is not far," he said, "but you must stay quiet. If anyone sees us, we are both dead." She nodded, her amber eyes never leaving his face. Isaac looked toward the road that led back to Thornmark, saw no one coming, and made his choice. He lifted her again, this time cradling her against his chest, and began to walk not toward the village, but toward the small stone cottage that stood alone at the edge of the cemetery grounds. It had been the gravedigger's house for generations, isolated enough that most people avoided it out of superstition. The girl's head lolled against his shoulder, and he felt her grip on his shirt weakening. He needed to move faster. He pushed through the door of his cottage and kicked it shut behind them, then laid her on his narrow bed. In the light that streamed through the window, he could see just how badly she was hurt. The wound in her side was deep, and she had lost a great deal of blood. Her green skin had taken on an ashen quality that spoke of death creeping closer with every labored breath. Isaac had learned basic field medicine during his own time in the militia years ago, before his bad leg had gotten him discharged. He gathered clean water, cloth for bandages, and the bottle of strong spirits he kept for the coldest nights. The girl watched him with those amber eyes, fear and hope warring in their depths. "This is going to hurt," he warned her. "I need to clean the wound and stitch it closed." "Do what you must," she said, her voice barely audible. "I will not scream." She kept her word, though Isaac saw tears stream down her green cheeks as he worked. The wound was from a spear thrust, he thought, meant to kill but missing the vital organs by inches. He cleaned it as thoroughly as he could, poured spirits over it to prevent infection while she shuddered and bit down on the leather strap he had given her, then stitched it closed with the same careful precision he had once used to mend harness leather. When he finally tied off the last stitch and bandaged her properly, her eyes had closed, and her breathing had evened into something that might have been sleep or might have been unconsciousness. Isaac stood and looked down at her, at this enemy soldier lying in his bed, and wondered what madness had possessed him. If anyone discovered her here, they would hang him for treason. At best. At worst, they would burn his house with both of them inside it. But when he looked at her face, still so young despite the scars that marked her jaw and forehead, he could not bring himself to regret his choice. He spent the rest of the day finishing the mass grave and covering it, all while keeping one eye on the cottage. No one came to disturb him, which was common enough. People in Thornmark avoided the gravedigger when they could. When darkness fell, Isaac returned to the cottage to find the girl still unconscious but breathing more easily. He changed her bandages, spooned water between her lips until she swallowed reflexively, and settled into the chair by the fire to keep watch through the night. She woke near dawn with a gasp, her hand reaching for a weapon that was no longer at her side. Isaac raised his hands to show he meant no harm, and after a moment her body relaxed back into the pillows. "You are still here," she said, and he heard the wonder in her voice. "This is my house," Isaac replied with a small smile. "Where else would I be? I thought perhaps I had dreamed you." She looked around the small cottage, taking in the simple furnishings and the books that lined one wall. "I thought I would wake in the earth or in chains or not at all." "What is your name?" Isaac asked. She hesitated, as if the act of giving him her name was a gift she was not certain he deserved. "Raktha," she said finally. "Of the Split Rock clan, or I was before." "Before what?" "Before I was stupid enough to think I could make a difference." Her laugh was bitter and ended in a cough that made her clutch at her bandaged side. "The elders wanted war. The humans wanted war. But some of us thought perhaps there could be peace if we could just talk to each other like people instead of like enemies. I was scouting for a delegation that was supposed to meet with your village leaders under a white flag." Isaac felt something cold settle in his stomach. There was no delegation. Only a raid 2 weeks ago that killed 6 people. "Because your soldiers ambushed us on the road," Raktha said, her voice rising with emotion before she caught herself. "We were flying the peace banner. We were unarmed except for ceremonial blades, and they cut us down like animals. I survived only because I fell early and they thought I was already dead. I crawled away and tried to make it back to my clan, but I collapsed before I reached safety. I do not remember anything after that until I woke in the dark, surrounded by the smell of death. Isaac processed this information slowly. The official story had been that a war party was marching on Thornmark and had been heroically defeated. But he knew how often official stories were shaped to serve those in power. He had seen enough of war to know that both sides always claimed righteousness while committing the same atrocities. "I am sorry," he said, "for what was done to you and your people." Raktha stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You are sorry. You are human. I am Orc. We are enemies. That is how the world works." "That is how other people say the world works," Isaac corrected gently. "But I am just a gravedigger, and you are just a girl who nearly died. The rest seems less important than that." She said nothing for a long moment, but something in her expression softened. "Why did you save me? You could have left me in that pit. No one would have known." "I would have known," Isaac said simply, "and I have buried enough dead. I am glad to help one person live for a change." The days that followed fell into a careful rhythm. Isaac continued his work in the cemetery, maintaining the appearance of normalcy while internally terrified that someone would come to search his house. In the evenings, he would return to find Raktha slowly growing stronger. Her wound was healing cleanly, though she would bear the scar forever. She slept most of the first week, her body fighting off fever and exhaustion. When she was finally strong enough to sit up and eat solid food, she began to talk. At first it was just simple things, complaints about being bedridden, questions about the strange human custom of keeping so many books in one place, requests for water or for him to help her to the chamber pot, while she blushed with embarrassment despite his professional detachment. But gradually, the conversations deepened. Raktha told him about growing up in the Split Rock clan, learning to track and hunt and fight before she had seen 10 winters. She spoke of her mother, who had died defending their camp from a human raid when Raktha was 12. Of her father, who had never been the same afterward, who had poured his grief into teaching his daughter to be the perfect warrior so she might never fall as her mother had. Of the friends she had lost to this endless war, and of the growing conviction she had felt that there had to be another way. Isaac found himself sharing things he had not spoken of in years. He told her about his wife Margaret, about the quiet happiness they had built together until the fever had stolen her away. About how he had become the gravedigger because he could not bear to leave her alone in the cemetery. How he had thought that tending to the dead might somehow keep him connected to her memory. He told her about his own brief time as a militia soldier, about the things he had seen and done that still sometimes woke him in the night. "We are both haunted," Raktha observed one evening as they sat by the fire. She was wrapped in a blanket, having finally been allowed to leave the bed for short periods. "You by your dead, me by my failures." "Perhaps," Isaac agreed, "or perhaps we are both just trying to find a way to live with what we cannot change." She studied him across the firelight, and he found himself noticing details he had been too busy to see before. The way her dark hair fell past her shoulders in waves when it was clean and brushed, the intelligence in her amber eyes, the grace in her movements even as she was still recovering. She was beautiful, he realized with a start, and the thought made him feel guilty and confused in equal measure. As if sensing his discomfort, Raktha looked away. "How long can I stay here?" she asked quietly. "I am well enough now to travel, I think. If I leave at night, I might be able to make it back to clan lands before anyone sees me." "Your wound is not fully healed," Isaac said, pushing aside the complicated feelings her question had stirred. Another week at least before you should be trying to cross rough country, and winter is coming. The passes will be dangerous, more dangerous than staying in a human village where I would be killed on sight. But there was no real argument in her tone, only resignation. You will stay, Isaac said firmly, until you are fully healed and until we can figure out a safe way to get you home. Why do you care? Raktha asked, and this time she looked directly at him. I am nothing to you. An orc girl you found by accident. You have already done more than anyone could expect. Why risk yourself further for me? Isaac did not have a good answer to that, or at least not one he was ready to admit. So instead he said, because it is the right thing to do. Is that not enough? Raktha smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. You are a strange human, Isaac Winters. I will take that as a compliment. The autumn deepened into early winter, and still Raktha remained in the cottage. Her wound healed to an angry red scar that she would trace sometimes when she thought Isaac was not looking. She grew restless, unused to being confined to such a small space, and Isaac returned home one day to find she had reorganized his entire kitchen and scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. I needed something to do, she said defensively, when she saw his surprised expression. I am going mad with boredom. After that, Isaac began bringing her things to occupy her time. Books from his collection, which she devoured with surprising enthusiasm, mending work from the village that he claimed he was doing himself, but which she completed with neat, precise stitches. He taught her to play chess with a battered set he had inherited from the previous Gravedigger, and she proved a quick learner who soon beat him more often than not. They settled into domesticity, without either of them quite meaning to. Raktha cooked meals with the supplies Isaac brought, having learned the skill from her mother, and displaying a talent for making simple ingredients into something delicious. Isaac taught her the common words she did not know, and she taught him phrases in the orc tongue, laughing when he mangled the pronunciation. They talked late into the night about everything and nothing about the stars and the seasons, about the proper way to season venison, about whether the soul persisted after death or faded into nothing. Isaac found himself hurrying through his work each day, eager to return to the cottage and to her. He caught himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering if she would laugh at some small absurdity he had witnessed, or if she would enjoy a particular passage in a book he was reading. It terrified him, these feelings that were growing despite every reasonable objection his mind could raise. She was orc. He was human. Their peoples were at war. She would leave as soon as she could, return to her clan and her life, and he would go back to being alone with the dead. Any deeper attachment would only bring pain. But the heart did not listen to reason, and Isaac knew he was already in far deeper than was wise. Raktha seemed to sense the shift in him, though she said nothing directly. She began touching him more often, a hand on his arm when she wanted his attention, her shoulder brushing his as they sat by the fire, her fingers lingering when he helped her with some task. Each touch felt electric, charged with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. The first snow came in late November, and with it came danger. The village held a memorial service for the soldiers who had died in the ambush of the peace delegation, though of course they called it a battle against an invading force. Isaac was required to attend as the Gravedigger, and he listened to the speeches about human valor and orc savagery with a sick feeling in his stomach. When he returned home that evening, he found Raktha standing at the window, looking out at the snow-covered cemetery. I heard the bells, she said without turning. What was the occasion? Isaac told her and watched her shoulders tense. They celebrate murdering my friends, she said, her voice flat. They make heroes of butchers. Not everyone believes the official story, Isaac said carefully. But fear makes people cruel. And the war has gone on so long that no one remembers why it started, only that it continues. Can it ever end? Raktha asked, finally turning to face him. Or will we keep killing each other until there is no one left? I do not know, Isaac admitted. But I know that you and I are not at war. That has to count for something. She crossed the small room to stand before him, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her amber eyes. You have become dear to me, Isaac Winters, she said softly. I did not mean for it to happen, but I cannot seem to help it. When I think of leaving, of never seeing you again. She trailed off, shaking her head. Isaac's heart was pounding so hard he was certain she could hear it. You have become dear to me as well, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and necessary. More than dear, if I am being honest. This is foolish, Raktha whispered, but she did not step away. We come from different worlds. What future could we possibly have? I do not know that either, Isaac said. But I know I do not want you to leave. I know that this cottage has felt more like a home in the past 2 months than it has in the 3 years since Margaret died. I know that when I imagine tomorrow, you are in it. Raktha reached up and touched his face, her calloused fingers gentle against his cheek. I am afraid, she confessed. I have faced enemy blades without fear, but this terrifies me. Me too, Isaac said, and then he closed the distance between them and kissed her. Her lips were warm despite the cold that seeped through the walls, and she tasted of the tea they had been drinking and of something else, something indefinably her. She made a small sound of surprise that quickly became something else entirely, and her arms came up to wrap around his neck. Isaac pulled her closer, mindful of her healing wound, and lost himself in the sensation of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Raktha laughed shakily. Well, she said, that happened. It did, Isaac agreed, unable to stop smiling. And I am not sorry. Neither am I, Raktha said, and kissed him again. That night they lay together in Isaac's narrow bed, Raktha's head pillowed on his chest while he ran his fingers through her hair. They did not make love, her wound was still too fresh, and both of them seemed content to simply hold each other, but the intimacy of sleeping in each other's arms felt profound in its own way. I still have to leave eventually, Raktha said into the darkness. My clan will think I am dead. And I cannot hide here forever. I know, Isaac said, though the words made his chest ache. But perhaps not yet. Stay through the winter at least. The passes will be impassable soon anyway. Through the winter, Raktha agreed and tightened her arms around him. The winter months passed in a strange sort of suspended reality. The snow piled high enough that Isaac sometimes had trouble reaching the cemetery, and the village largely left him alone. He and Raktha existed in their small cottage, as if the rest of the world had ceased to matter, building a life together that both knew could not last, but were determined to enjoy while they could. They made love for the first time on a night in December when a blizzard raged outside, the wind howling around the cottage like a living thing. Raktha's wound had healed fully by then, leaving only the scar, and when Isaac traced its path with gentle fingers she shivered and pulled him closer. He learned the geography of her body, the surprising softness of her green skin, the sensitive spots that made her gasp, the strength in her muscles and the vulnerability in her eyes when she let him see her completely. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Raktha said, I love you, Isaac Winters. I know I should not, but I do. I love you too, Isaac replied, the words feeling like both a gift and a curse. And I do not care who says we should not. But the world beyond their cottage walls did not stop simply because they wished it would. In January, rumors began circulating through Thornmark of orc scouts being spotted in the hills. The village council called up the militia and posted guards on the roads. Isaac heard people talking about another attack being imminent, about the need to strike first before the savages could organize. He knew he should tell Raktha, but he kept putting it off, not wanting to shatter the peace they had built. She noticed his distraction, of course. "What troubles you?" she asked one evening as they prepared dinner together. Isaac hesitated, then told her everything he had heard. Raktha listened in silence, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "I need to go," she said when he finished. "If my clan is sending scouts, it means they are planning something. I might be able to stop it, or at least warn them that the humans are preparing." "You could also be killed trying to cross the frontier," Isaac pointed out. "The militia will shoot anything green on sight right now." "Then what do you suggest?" Raktha demanded, frustration bleeding into her voice. "That I hide here forever while our peoples tear each other apart?" "Isaac, I have to try." "I know," Isaac said heavily. "I know you do, I just—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the fear that had been growing in him since autumn. The fear that once she left, she would never come back. Raktha came to him and took his hands in hers. "Come with me," she said suddenly. Isaac stared at her. "What? Come with me," Raktha repeated, her amber eyes bright with sudden hope. "You said yourself that you have little keeping you here. Come with me to my clan. We will tell them what happened, how you saved me." "Surely that will count for something." "Your people will kill me," Isaac said flatly. "Or have you forgotten that we are at war?" "Some might try," Raktha admitted, "but others will listen. And I will not let them harm you, I swear it." "Isaac, we cannot keep living like this, pretending the world does not exist. We have to try to make a place for ourselves in it." Isaac wanted to argue, to point out all the ways her plan could go wrong. But he looked at her face, at the determination and hope written there, and found he could not crush that hope with his cynicism. "If I go with you," he said slowly, "there is no coming back. Thornmark will consider me a traitor if they do not already." "I know," Raktha said. "I am asking you to give up everything for me. I am asking for more than I have any right to. But I am asking anyway, because I cannot imagine a future without you in it." Isaac thought of his cottage, of the cemetery he had tended for 3 years, of the grave where Margaret rested. He thought of the life he had built from grief and duty, and how empty it had felt before Raktha had crashed into it. He thought of the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she sang while she cooked, the way she fit perfectly against him when they slept. He thought of the alternative, staying here and watching her walk away, spending the rest of his life wondering what might have been. "All right," he said, and watched her face light up with joy. "All right, I will come with you, but we do this smart. We prepare properly and we wait for the right moment." Raktha threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over with the force of her embrace. "Thank you," she said into his chest. "Thank you, thank you." They spent the next week preparing in secret. Isaac gathered supplies, food that would travel well, warm clothing, medical supplies, his best knife. He wrote a letter to the village council explaining that he was leaving and that they would need to find a new gravedigger, though he did not mention where he was going or why. He visited Margaret's grave one last time and stood there for a long while, silently explaining his decision to the stone that marked her resting place. "I will always love you," he said aloud, "but I think you would understand. I think you would want me to be happy." The wind stirred the snow around the grave, and Isaac chose to take it as a blessing. They left on a clear night in late January when the moon was dark and the village slept. Isaac locked the cottage door behind them, shouldered his pack, and took Raktha's hand. Together they walked away from the only life he had known, heading north and east toward the frontier and whatever lay beyond. The journey was brutal. Winter in the mountains was unforgiving even to those well prepared for it, and they were traveling through terrain that neither of them knew well, while trying to avoid both human and orc patrols. They slept rough most nights, huddled together for warmth in whatever shelter they could find. They rationed their food carefully, knowing it had to last until they reached clan lands. On the fourth day, they spotted a human patrol and had to hide for 3 hours behind a snowbank, while the soldiers passed close enough that Isaac could hear their conversation. On the sixth day, they stumbled across an orc hunting party, and only Raktha's quick thinking saved Isaac from being killed on sight. She stepped forward and called out in the orc tongue, identifying herself and her clan. The hunters were suspicious, especially of Isaac, but they agreed to escort them the rest of the way rather than leaving them to freeze. The Split Rock Clan's winter camp was a collection of sturdy buildings carved partially into the mountainside, protected from the worst of the weather and easily defensible. As Raktha and Isaac approached with their escort, people began to emerge from the buildings, and Isaac heard the shock ripple through the gathered orcs as they recognized Raktha. She lives. How is this possible? Who is that human with her? A large orc with scars covering his arms and a missing tusk pushed to the front of the crowd. He stared at Raktha as if seeing a ghost, his expression cycling through disbelief, joy, and then suspicion as his eyes fell on Isaac. "Raktha," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We thought you dead." "I nearly was, father," Raktha replied. She gestured to Isaac. "This is Isaac Winters. He saved my life, sheltered me through the winter, and has come with me now, though it means giving up everything he knows. I ask that you grant him safe passage and hear our story." Raktha's father looked Isaac up and down with a measuring gaze that made Isaac very aware of how many weapons were currently pointed in his direction. "You bring a human to our winter camp in a time of war, daughter. You ask much." "I know," Raktha said, "but I am asking anyway." The old orc was silent for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well. Come inside, both of you, we will hear your story. But if I find treachery in it, human, your death will be neither quick nor pleasant." "Understood," Isaac said, keeping his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. They were brought into a large communal hall where the clan leaders gathered. Isaac stood beside Raktha while she told their story, the ambush of the peace delegation, waking among the dead. Isaac's decision to save her rather than simply covering her over. The months they had spent together. She left out some details, the more intimate moments they had shared, but she did not hide the fact that they had fallen in love. The response was mixed. Some of the elders argued that Isaac should be killed as an enemy combatant, regardless of what he might have done for Raktha. Others pointed out that he had saved one of their own and asked for nothing in return. Still others were deeply suspicious of his motives, suggesting he might be a spy sent to infiltrate the clan. Through it all, Raktha's father sat silent, his expression unreadable. When the arguments finally died down, he stood. "My daughter is alive because of this human," he said. "That is a debt that cannot be ignored. But neither can we ignore that his people and ours are at war, or that bringing him here puts us all at risk." He turned to Isaac. "What do you want, Isaac Winters? Why did you really come here?" Isaac met his gaze steadily. "I came here because I love your daughter and I could not bear to be parted from her. I came here because I am tired of the war and the killing, and I hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be another way. I do not expect you to trust me. I would not trust me in your position. But I am asking for a chance to prove myself." "And how would you do that?" another elder challenged. "I am a gravedigger by trade," Isaac said. "But before that I was a farmer. I know the land, I know how to work it. I can contribute to the clan if you let me. And more than that, I can be a voice for peace. I can tell you about the humans in Thornmark, help you understand them as people rather than just as enemies. Maybe that understanding can be the first step toward ending this war." Pretty words, the elder scoffed. But words do not fill bellies or turn aside blades. No, Isaac agreed. But maybe they can prevent the need for blades in the first place. The council debated for hours, and Isaac was eventually sent out of the hall while they deliberated in private. He waited in an antechamber with Raktha, both of them tense with worry. "Whatever they decide," Raktha said quietly, "I will not let them harm you. If they refuse to accept you, we will leave together." "And go where?" Isaac asked. "We cannot go back to Thornmark, and if your clan will not have us, where else is there?" "Then we will make our own place," Raktha said fiercely. "Somewhere far from both our peoples where we can just be." Isaac pulled her close, drawing comfort from her warmth. "I hope it does not come to that." It did not. When they were finally called back in, Raktha's father announced the council's decision. "You may stay, Isaac Winters, but not as an equal. Not yet. You will be considered a guest of Raktha's family under her father's protection and authority. You will prove your worth through your actions and your labor. If after the spring thaw the council agrees that you have earned your place, you may petition to join the clan formally. Do you accept these terms?" "I do," Isaac said without hesitation. "Then it is settled." Raktha's father looked between them, his expression softening slightly. "Come, I will show you where you will be staying." He led them to a small dwelling carved into the mountainside, simply furnished but warm and dry. "This was your mother's workshop," he said to Raktha. "I have kept it maintained but unused since her death. It seems fitting that you should have it now." After he left, Raktha and Isaac stood in the center of the room, processing everything that had just happened. "We did it," Raktha said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "The first part anyway," Isaac cautioned. "I still have to prove myself." "You will," Raktha said with absolute confidence. She crossed to him and took his hands. "We will build a life here, Isaac, a real life together." "I hope so," Isaac said and kissed her. The next months were the hardest Isaac had ever endured. He worked from dawn until long after dark, taking on any task that needed doing no matter how menial or difficult. He helped repair buildings damaged by winter storms, hauled water, chopped wood until his hands bled and then wrapped them and kept chopping. He learned to speak the Orc tongue with increasing fluency, and he shared his knowledge of human farming techniques that helped the clan improve their crop yields. Not everyone was welcoming. Some Orcs refused to speak to him or acknowledge his presence. Others went out of their way to make his life difficult, assigning him the worst tasks or criticizing everything he did. There were a few who openly called for him to be expelled or killed, especially when news came of continued fighting on the frontier. But gradually, slowly, things began to change. The children were the first to accept him, curious about this strange human who lived among them. They would follow him around asking endless questions, and Isaac found himself telling them stories about human lands and customs that both entertained and educated. Their parents noticed how patiently he answered even the silliest questions, how he treated the children with kindness and respect. The warriors noticed how hard he worked, how he never complained or tried to get out of the most difficult tasks. Some of them began to nod to him when they passed, a small acknowledgement but meaningful. The hunters saw how he could track and move quietly through the forest, skills he had learned during his militia days. They began to include him in hunting parties, first as a pack carrier, but eventually as an actual participant. Raktha's father remained distant but fair, watching Isaac with eyes that missed nothing. Isaac made sure to show the older Orc respect while not being obsequious, a fine line that he navigated carefully. He asked Raktha about her mother, learned the ways to honor her memory that were important to the clan. He left offerings at the small shrine in their dwelling and tended it as carefully as he had once tended graves. Through it all, Raktha was his anchor. They fell into the rhythms of a shared life, learning each other's habits and quirks. She taught him to fight in the orc style, which emphasized strength and directness over the more defensive human techniques he had learned. He taught her to read and write common better, knowing that if they ever hoped to negotiate peace, such skills would be invaluable. At night, they would lie together and talk about their hopes for the future. Raktha wanted to restart the peace initiative that had gotten her nearly killed, but with better planning and more support. Isaac wanted to establish trade between the clan and some of the more moderate human settlements, believing that economic ties might ease tensions. They dreamed of a day when a human and an orc walking together would not be cause for shock or violence. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape. Snowmelt rushed down from the peaks, flowers bloomed in sudden profusion, and the clan's mood lightened with the warmer weather. Isaac had been with them for 3 months now, and he could feel the shift in how people treated him. The hostility had not disappeared entirely, but it had diminished. People greeted him by name now, included him in conversations, asked his opinion on matters relating to human behavior or settlements. The council met again in early April to reconsider Isaac's status. This time, when he stood before them, many of the faces were not unfamiliar strangers but people he had worked beside, shared meals with, helped in small ways over the past months. Raktha's father spoke first. "Isaac Winters, when you came to us in the dead of winter, you were a stranger and an enemy. You asked for a chance to prove yourself. The council believes you have done so. Several of our people have spoken in your favor, citing your hard work, your willingness to learn our ways, and your honest dealing. More than that, you have shown yourself to be a person of honor and integrity. The council is prepared to offer you full membership in the Split Rock clan if you wish to accept it." Relief and joy flooded through Isaac in equal measure. "I accept with gratitude and humility. Thank you for giving me this chance." "There is one more matter," another elder said. "It has not escaped our notice that you and Raktha have formed a bond. In our culture, such bonds are formalized through a bonding ceremony. Would you wish to participate in such a ceremony?" Isaac looked at Raktha, who was smiling so wide her small tusks were fully visible. He had not dared to hope for this, for official recognition of their relationship. "I would be honored," he managed. "Then it is settled," Raktha's father said, and for the first time since Isaac had met him, the old orc smiled. "Welcome to the clan, son." The bonding ceremony was held 2 weeks later, giving time for preparations and for word to spread through the clan. It was nothing like human weddings Isaac had attended. There was no priest or formal vows. Instead, Raktha and Isaac stood before the gathered clan at sunset and told the story of how they had met, how they had come to care for each other, and why they chose to bind their lives together. "I was dying among the dead," Raktha said, her voice carrying clearly in the spring evening. "And this human chose to save me even though it put him at risk. He could have walked away. He could have killed me and no one would have blamed him. Instead, he carried me to safety and tended my wounds. He gave me shelter and kindness when he owed me nothing. He learned to see past the color of my skin and the shape of my body to the person beneath. And in doing so, he taught me that peace between our peoples is not just possible but necessary. I choose Isaac Winters as my bonded mate, and I will stand with him against whatever may come." Isaac spoke next, his hands trembling slightly as they clasped Raktha's. "I was alone among the living," he said, "doing my duty but feeling nothing, existing but not truly alive. Raktha changed that. She brought laughter back into my life and hope and purpose. She challenged me to be better than I was, to care about more than just myself and my grief. She showed me courage and compassion in equal measure. I choose Raktha as my bonded mate, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice. Raktha's father stepped forward and wrapped a cord around their joined hands, tying it in an intricate knot. "You are bound," he said. "From this day forward, you share your fates. May your bond be strong and your lives be long." The clan erupted in cheers, and Isaac found himself pulled into embraces by people who had been strangers just months ago but who now felt like family. There was food and music and dancing, and Isaac danced with Raktha under the stars, both of them laughing with pure joy. Later that night, alone in their dwelling, Raktha traced the line of Isaac's jaw with gentle fingers. "Are you happy?" she asked. "I am," Isaac said, and realized it was completely true. "I never thought I would be again, but I am." "Good," Raktha said and kissed him. "Because I have something to tell you." Isaac pulled back to look at her, noting suddenly the nervousness in her expression. "What is it?" "I am with child," Raktha said. "Our child. A healer confirmed it this morning." Isaac stared at her, processing the words. A child. They were going to have a child. A child who would be half human and half orc, who would embody everything they had been fighting for, the possibility of unity between their peoples, proof that love could bridge even the deepest divides. That is. Isaac struggled to find words adequate to what he was feeling. "That is incredible, amazing, terrifying," Raktha laughed, some of her nervousness fading. "All of those, yes. Are you pleased?" "Pleased does not begin to cover it," Isaac said, and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I love you." "I love you so much." "I love you too," Raktha said against his chest. "And I am glad you are happy, because I was afraid you might not be." "How could I not be?" Isaac asked. "A child is hope made manifest. Our child will grow up in a world where humans and orcs can live together in peace." "That is everything we have been working toward. We still have far to go before that world exists," Raktha cautioned. "The war continues. People on both sides still hate and fear each other." "I know," Isaac said, "but we have made a start, and our child will be part of that change." The months that followed were busy as the clan prepared for the summer raiding season, not raids against humans, as Isaac had feared, but hunting expeditions and resource-gathering parties to stock up for the next winter. Isaac joined these expeditions, continuing to prove his worth to the clan. He was accepted now, truly accepted, but he never took that acceptance for granted. Raktha could not join the hunting parties as her pregnancy advanced, which frustrated her immensely. She channeled that energy into other projects, specifically into crafting a detailed proposal for renewed peace talks with the human settlements. She and Isaac worked on it together, trying to anticipate objections and address them preemptively. "The key is to approach settlements that are less militaristic," Isaac explained. "Thornmark will never agree to peace talks, not after everything that has happened. But there are other villages, smaller ones further from the frontier, where people are tired of the war and might be willing to listen." "Will they listen to an orc, though?" Raktha asked. "Even if I come under a white flag, they might kill me on sight." "Then I will go first," Isaac suggested. "I can approach them as a human, explain the situation, and hopefully broker a meeting on neutral ground." They presented their proposal to the clan council in midsummer. The response was cautious but not dismissive. "The last peace delegation ended in massacre," one elder pointed out. "Why would this be any different?" "Because this time we will not go in blind," Raktha argued. "Isaac knows the human lands and can identify settlements that might be receptive. We will start small with just one village, and we will build trust gradually rather than trying to achieve everything at once." "And if it fails?" Raktha's father asked. "If they capture or kill you both?" "Then at least we will have tried," Raktha said. "I would rather die trying to make peace than live with the knowledge that I did nothing while the killing continued." After much debate, the council agreed to let them make the attempt, but only after Raktha had given birth and recovered. They would not risk both her and the child. Isaac and Raktha agreed to these terms, though both were impatient to begin. Their daughter was born in early autumn, during the first cold snap of the season. The labor was long and difficult, and Isaac held Raktha's hand through all of it, marveling at her strength and cursing his helplessness. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Isaac wept with relief and overwhelming love. She was beautiful, with green skin a shade lighter than Raktha's, tiny tusks that were barely visible, and Isaac's dark hair. Her eyes, when they finally opened, were a golden brown that seemed to blend both their heritages. They named her Kira, which in the Orc tongue meant hope. Raktha's father was the first to visit after the birth, and Isaac saw his face transform when he held his granddaughter. "She is perfect," he said softly. "She looks like her grandmother." Over the next months, Kira became the darling of the clan. Everyone wanted to hold her, to make her smile, to teach her the clan's songs and stories. Isaac watched his daughter grow and thrive, and felt a fierce protectiveness that he had never experienced before. This child would have a better world than the one he and Raktha had inherited. He would make certain of it. When Kira was 6 months old and Raktha had fully recovered her strength, they decided it was time to pursue their peace initiative. They chose a small farming village called Millbrook as their target, a place Isaac had heard of but never visited. It was far enough from the frontier that the war was more abstract than immediate, and it had a reputation for being practical rather than ideological. Isaac went first, alone, traveling in early spring when the roads were passable. He reached Millbrook after 3 days of hard riding and presented himself to the village elder as a former resident of Thornmark, who had information about the orcs that might be valuable. The elder, a shrewd woman named Adeline Sterling, listened to his story with growing astonishment. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish," she said finally. "Probably both, and you want us to agree to meet with orcs to discuss peace." "I want you to consider it," Isaac said. "I am not asking you to trust them sight unseen, but I am asking you to acknowledge that the war is costing both sides dearly and that there might be another way. And if we agree to this meeting, what guarantees do we have that it is not a trap?" "None," Isaac admitted. "Just as the orcs will have no guarantees that you will not try to ambush them. That is why trust has to be built slowly, through small steps. Meet with one orc representative on neutral ground. Hear what she has to say. If you are not satisfied, you can walk away and nothing has changed. But if there is even a chance that we can end the bloodshed, is it not worth taking?" Adeline considered this. "I will bring your proposal to the village council. We will send word to you within a week." The week felt like a year, but when the message came, it was cautiously positive. Millbrook would agree to a meeting. With certain conditions, it would be on neutral ground. Both sides could bring no more than 3 people, and weapons would be checked at the start of the meeting. Isaac agreed immediately and sent word back to the clan. The meeting took place in a meadow halfway between Millbrook and the nearest clan territory. Isaac and Raktha came with Raktha's father as their third. Millbrook sent Adeline and 2 of their hunters. The 2 groups faced each other across the meadow, tension crackling in the air. Adeline spoke first, her eyes fixed on Raktha. "I will be honest. Everything in me says this is a mistake, that I should not be here talking to the enemy, but Isaac has vouched for you and I am willing to listen. Say your piece." Raktha stepped forward, her posture open and non-threatening despite her obvious strength. "I am Raktha of the Split Rock clan, and I am tired of war. I am tired of burying friends and family. I am tired of living in fear that every day might bring another attack. I think you are tired too. I think both our peoples are ready for something different if we can just find the courage to try." "Pretty words," one of the Millbrook hunters said, "but orcs have been raiding human settlements for generations. Why should we believe you want peace now?" "Because raiding goes both ways," Raktha countered. "Humans have attacked orc camps just as often. Both sides have committed atrocities. Both sides have lost people they love. But that cycle can end if we choose to end it." "And how do you propose we do that?" Adeline asked. "Start with trade," Isaac suggested. "Your village produces grain and vegetables. The orc clans have access to furs, metals from mountain deposits, medicinal herbs that do not grow in the lowlands. Trade benefits both sides and creates incentive to maintain peace." "Trade requires trust," Adeline pointed out. "How do we build that?" Slowly, Raktha said. "We could start with a small exchange. Your village sends a cart of grain to a designated point. We leave furs and herbs in return. No contact, just goods. If both sides honor the exchange, we do it again. And again. We build a pattern of reliability." The discussion went on for hours, both sides probing and questioning, looking for traps or hidden agendas. But gradually, something shifted. The conversation moved from whether peace was possible to how it might be implemented. By the time the sun began to set, they had the framework of an agreement. Millbrook would participate in a trial trade arrangement for 6 months. If it went well, they would consider more formal negotiations. They would not publicize the arrangement yet, since both sides feared how hardliners might react, but they would begin the slow work of building a relationship. "This is not peace," Adeline cautioned as they prepared to part ways. "This is just a tiny step toward it." "Every journey begins with a single step," Raktha replied. "Thank you for taking it with us." The trade arrangement worked better than anyone had dared hope. Both sides honored their commitments, and the exchanges gradually became more elaborate and more personal. Millbrook sent a representative to actually meet with clan traders, and vice versa. Relationships formed, tentative friendships even. Other villages heard about Millbrook's experiment and became curious. Some were hostile to the idea, but others reached out tentatively, asking if similar arrangements might be possible. Raktha and Isaac found themselves traveling constantly, mediating between humans and orcs, troubleshooting problems, and always talking about peace. It was exhausting work, and there were setbacks. A trade caravan was ambushed by bandits, and both sides briefly suspected betrayal before the truth came out. A head-headed young warrior from another clan attacked a human hunting party, nearly derailing everything. But each time, Raktha and Isaac and their growing network of allies on both sides worked to repair the damage and maintain the fragile trust they had built. Kira grew into a bright, curious toddler who knew no difference between humans and orcs, who played equally with children of both races when such meetings became possible. She was living proof that the two peoples could coexist, and she became something of a symbol for the peace movement. 3 years after that first meeting in the meadow, Raktha and Isaac stood before a much larger gathering representatives from a dozen human villages and 5 orc clans, all come together to negotiate a formal peace treaty. The negotiations were contentious and difficult, with old grievances constantly threatening to derail progress. But slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. The treaty established neutral trade zones, protocols for handling disputes without violence, and mechanisms for cultural exchange. It was not perfect, and Isaac knew it would not end conflict overnight. There would still be incidents, still people on both sides who rejected peace. But it was a foundation, something to build on. The day the treaty was signed, Raktha squeezed Isaac's hand and whispered, "We did it." "We actually did it." "We did," Isaac agreed, his voice thick with emotion, though it almost seems impossible looking back. "You saved my life that day in the cemetery," Raktha said, "but I think maybe I saved yours too. We saved each other. And now we are helping to save our peoples from endless war," Isaac added. "Our daughter will grow up in a world where humans and orcs can live as neighbors instead of enemies. That is worth everything we have been through." They returned to the Split Rock clan settlement as heroes, but Isaac and Raktha both felt uncomfortable with the praise. They had simply done what needed to be done, what should have been done generations ago. The real work was just beginning, the work of making peace last, of changing hearts and minds, of building true understanding between peoples who had been enemies for so long. But they would do that work together, as they had done everything else. Isaac looked at Raktha, at the woman who had grabbed his wrist in a pit of the dead, and refused to let go, who had pulled him from his own grave of grief and isolation, and given him a reason to live again. He thought of their daughter, playing with both human and orc children without seeing difference. He thought of the future they were building, one difficult conversation and one trade agreement at a time. "I love you," he told Raktha as they stood watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. Thank you for grabbing my wrist and not letting go," Isaac said with a smile. "Thank you for holding on even when it would have been easier to give up." Raktha leaned her head against his shoulder, and they stood together as the stars began to emerge. They had faced death and prejudice and war itself, and they had come through it together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face those together too. That was the nature of love, the nature of the bond they had forged in impossible circumstances and tested in fire. Around them, the settlement prepared for the evening meal, and Isaac could hear both human and orc voices mingling in conversation and laughter. Children ran past, including Kira with her mixed heritage and her bright future. The world was changing, slowly but surely, and Isaac and Raktha stood at the center of that change. It had begun with a desperate grab in the darkness, with a plea not to be buried alive. It had grown into love and trust and partnership. And now it was blossoming into hope for both their peoples, into the possibility of a future where the color of one's skin mattered less than the content of one's character. Isaac Winters had been a gravedigger, a tender of the dead, living in the shadow of loss. Now he was a bridge builder, a peacemaker, a husband and father. He had found life in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely person, and for that he would be grateful for all his remaining days. Raktha pulled him toward their home, where dinner waited and their daughter's laughter rang out. They had built a life from nothing, created a family from two people who should have been enemies. They had proven that love could cross any divide, that peace was possible even after generations of war. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and precious. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not perfect, but real and full of hope. They had grabbed hold of each other in the darkness and refused to let go, and that simple act of holding on had changed everything. As they entered their home and Kira ran to greet them, Isaac looked at Raktha and saw his whole world reflected in her amber eyes. She smiled at him, that fierce, beautiful smile that had first captured his heart, and he knew that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. They had found each other among the dead, two lost souls who had saved each other in every way that mattered. And in finding each other, they had found the strength to change the world. That was the power of love, the power of refusing to give up on hope even in the darkest of circumstances. Their story had begun with death, but had become a celebration of life. And as Isaac sat down to dinner with his family, surrounded by the sounds of peace they had helped to create, he knew that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along: a home, a purpose, and a love that would last forever.